Hey everyone, this is my first and probably last post on Reddit. I'm writing from a throwaway account, so don't ask me the family's name. I won't tell. But I'm pretty sure 90% of you have seen these people on magazine covers or TV at least once. Let's just say they're the kind who smile at economic forums, shake hands with politicians, sponsor football clubs, build skyscrapers, and casually buy private islands for personal retreats. I've worked for them for over 10 years. Not a day, not a few weeks, not a single project. A whole life dissolved into someone else's. When I say worked, it's hard to explain. My role never had an official title. Sometimes I was a driver, sometimes a personal assistant, sometimes a courier, sometimes just the guy who handles small tasks. In other words, I was someone they trusted but always kept at arm's length. If you think this is a dream job, hold off on that thought. Yes, the pay is above average. Yes, I've seen houses straight out of documentaries. Yes, I've met people whose names sound like they belong in history books. But I've also witnessed things I wish I'd never seen. How did you end up there? It was almost by chance. I was working at a luxury hotel in Europe. My job was standard, concierge, basically. I greeted guests, handled their whims, booked cars, restaurant tables, tickets. Then one day, this family checks in. Well, not the whole family, just one of the heirs with his entourage. He was capricious but charismatic. He noticed I didn't ask unnecessary questions and always got things done. After a week, he said, "You know how to stay quiet and act fast. I need someone like that." 2 weeks later, I was at their countryside estate, signing confidentiality agreements. Trust me, it wasn't just a single-page NDA. It was dozens of pages of legal jargon, covering everything from not keeping a diary to not telling friends what I do. Break it, and they'd erase you, not metaphorically. How much do you earn? At first, I thought they were just using me. The initial offer was $7,000 a month. That's a lot, especially compared to the hotel where I made $2,000 at most. But here's the catch. Those $7,000 weren't for a 9-to-5 job. It was payment for your life no longer being yours. Later, the pay increased. In my best years, I made about $15,000 a month. Sounds amazing, right? But when you're on call 24/7, when you can get a call at 3 a.m. saying, "Plane leaves in an hour, pack your bags," it stops feeling like wealth. Plus, when you see the bosses spend more in one night than you'll earn in a year, you realize you're just a cog. They might buy a vintage watch collection for $800,000 and toss it in a drawer without even removing the plastic wrap. They might gift a yacht to a 10-year-old kid. Yes, a 10-year-old. Your $15,000 a month feels like pocket change in comparison. Did you ever have to do humiliating tasks? Yes, it was part of the system. Sometimes I'd be asked to buy a specific type of ice cream at 3 a.m. Other times, I'd drive their dog across town to walk where the air is cleaner. Once, I was told to stand by the pool for half a day with a phone to ensure the Wi-Fi signal didn't drop. The kids need to stream cartoons without lag. You don't get to say no. You don't even get to look surprised. If you're surprised, you're not a fit. If you argue, you're out. Was there anything good about it? Sure, I've been to dozens of countries I'd never have visited otherwise. I've flown on private jets, seen villas that could pass for museums. I've sat at tables with people the average person only sees on TV. But there's a catch. None of it is yours. You're a shadow. You're there, but you don't belong to their world. You might hold a 200-year-old bottle of wine, but you can't take a sip. You might be in a room where global stars perform, but you're only there to hand someone their jacket. Tell us about their houses. Are they really like in the movies? Movies don't do them justice. They don't have a house. They have dozens of residences. In every city they visit more than once a year, they own a villa or mansion, not apartments, only palaces. The first house I saw was outside Europe. From the outside, it looked modest. High walls, gates, a plain facade. But inside, it was another world. Marble floors, 5-meter-high ceilings, staircases you could mistake for museum exhibits. The house had a library bigger than my university, and a pool large enough for a boat to turn around in. Each mansion had its own theme. One was styled like the Italian Renaissance, Another was high-tech with glass walls and smart systems. But one thing was consistent: underground floors. Wherever we were, there were always doors we, the staff, weren't allowed to enter. Officially, they held equipment, safes, or wine cellars. But a couple of accidental glimpses told me they weren't just storage rooms. What about their weird rules? They had so many quirks that seemed pointless. For example, in one house, all mirrors were covered with heavy fabric for exactly 15 minutes every morning. Didn't matter who was staying or how many guests. 7:45 a.m., the staff had to cover the mirrors. 15 minutes later, uncover them. No explanation. In another house, there always had to be exactly 17 jars of a rare yogurt in the fridge. Not 16, not 18, 17. If one was eaten, a new one was delivered immediately. I once made the mistake of buying a pack of 12, and instead of thanks, I got a stern lecture. You've put us in an awkward position. Then there was the water rule. In one of their pools, no one was allowed to swim before sunset. No reason given, just forbidden. Even the kids, who usually broke every rule, followed this one. Do they have any human qualities? Sometimes. They could be cheerful, smiling, generous. One Christmas, they gathered all the staff in a hall and handed out envelopes with bonuses. I got the equivalent of 3 months' salary. Everyone was thrilled. But a week later, one of the managers threw a tantrum at a waitress for mixing up wine glasses. She was fired that same day. The bonus suddenly felt meaningless. That's their humanity. It's not real. It's a performance. One day they're generous and smiling, the next they act like you never existed. What's it like serving their guests? That's a whole separate story. Their guests are from the same circle, sometimes politicians, sometimes actors, sometimes other billionaires. But there were weirder moments. One night, guests arrived who weren't introduced. We had to serve dinner but were told not to look them in the eyes. Seriously, keep your eyes on the floor. They sat in the shadows, and we brought dishes in silence. After dinner, they sent us all home, which was rare. The next day, the family flew out on a private jet and didn't show up for a week. When did you realize this wasn't a normal job? Probably in the first year. There was a moment when I was escorting a family member on a trip. At the airport, we bypassed security, no checks, no passports, just a good afternoon, and we were in a private terminal. That's when I realized the laws you and I live by don't apply to them, only their rules matter. And if they want, the whole world bends to their will. What's their typical day like? It depends on where they are, but there's always a schedule. Even when it seems like they're living freely, every minute is planned. Mornings usually start with breakfast, not like ours, though. It's a whole production. For instance, the table always has to have 3 types of honey, one from New Zealand, one from Switzerland, one from an Arab country. Even if no one eats it, it has to be there. If one jar is missing, the staff gets chewed out. Their clothes are prepared in advance, sometimes a week ahead. In the wardrobe, there's a person whose sole job is to handle socks. I'm serious. The socks have to match not just the outfit, but the energy of the day. I never figured out what that meant, but I saw a guy get fired for picking the wrong pair. After breakfast, it's either meetings or workouts. They have private trainers, doctors, dietitians. Sometimes it feels like their entire day is about keeping their bodies and minds in peak condition. But then, at night, they might throw a party and demolish cases of alcohol, buckets of caviar, and 5 cakes. Is it true they have their own planes and yachts? Absolutely, and not just one. Most families in their circle have at least 2 planes, a big liner for official business and a smaller one for quick trips. My family had 3. I've flown on them dozens of times. It's like a 5-star hotel, bedrooms, showers, a bar, even a room with a grand piano. Yachts are another story. They had one modest one about 50 meters and a massive one, practically a floating city. It could house over 100 crew members. On board, pools, a movie theater, a helipad, all for a couple of weeks in the summer. Sometimes I'd catch myself thinking it all felt unreal. Too lavish, too excessive, like they were playing gods in a sandbox. What about the kids? How do they live? This is a sad topic. On one hand, they have everything. The best toys, the best teachers, trips, gadgets not even in stores yet. On the other, they live like they're in a cage. Every step is planned, every kid has security, nannies, mentors. I remember one boy who just wanted to ride a bike on the street. It sparked a whole meeting. They eventually let him, but only on a fenced-off property with 3 guards trailing him. As he rode, you could see he was happy but also a little scared, like he was tasting freedom for the first time and realizing he'd never truly have it. What's their weirdest habit? Their quirks are endless. One family member, for example, wouldn't eat food unless it took at least 3 hours to prepare. Didn't matter what it was, even a simple sandwich had to be started long before they sat down. Why? It brings out the flavor better. Another oddity, they never used regular watches. Only unique, custom-made, sometimes one-of-a-kind models. And none of them showed the correct time, always a few minutes fast or slow. I asked a colleague once and he said, it's their principle, never live in the same time as everyone else. Did you ever feel jealous? Of course, at first I envied everything, their money, freedom, opportunities. But the longer I stayed, the more I realized, this isn't a life, it's a performance. Everything's scripted, artificial. You might be in a palace, but you can't even open a window yourself. There's a guy for that. They're prisoners of their wealth. Their cage is just made of gold. You mentioned weird tasks, like what? One that stands out is the suitcase incident. I was told to deliver a massive, insanely heavy suitcase to an airport. I'd carried hundreds of bags, but this one, it felt wrong. Clothes don't weigh like that. They were strict, don't open it, don't ask questions. I followed orders, but on the way the suitcase made a sound, faint, muffled, like something knocked inside. I almost stopped the car but remembered the warning. A couple of days later, the news reported a prominent businessman had vanished. Last seen in the same city we were in. Coincidence? Maybe. But that was the first time I felt like I wasn't just an assistant, but an unwitting part of something I'd rather not know. You mentioned forbidden rooms. What's that about? Every house had doors only the family or security could enter. Staff were strictly forbidden. They usually looked like normal offices or storage rooms, but I accidentally ended up in one once. I got lost in a hallway and walked into a windowless room. The walls were padded with white fabric like in a psychiatric ward. In the center was a metal chair with straps, a camera in the corner. I froze, unable to believe my eyes. 20 seconds later, a guard walked in and said, "You're in the wrong room." No one fired me. No one mentioned it again. But for 3 days, I was waiting for someone to come for me. How do they hide all this? Masterfully. To the public, they're role models. Charity, foundations, green investments. They know how to craft the perfect image. But behind the scenes, it's a different world with their own rules. Anything goes. No laws apply. You see a headline, "Philanthropist donates $1 million to a children's hospital." I know that a week earlier, he ordered someone to be taken somewhere unknown. Did you ever feel like you were being watched? All the time. Their houses are covered in cameras, even where you'd think there aren't any. I'd find blind spots to catch a breath and feel human, only to spot a tiny lens in the corner and realize I was wrong. Once I noticed my personal messages disappearing from my phone. Just gone. I couldn't prove it, but I was sure. They were monitoring the staff's communications. Why didn't you leave? I thought about it. But leaving them is nearly impossible. The NDA you sign is basically a life sentence if you break it. And I saw what happened to people who tried to leave, who talked too much, who asked questions. Officially, they changed jobs. But among the staff we knew, some went to a place you don't come back from. What was the scariest moment you experienced? One incident stands out. We were at a countryside villa. That evening, guests arrived, not celebrities or politicians, just faces I didn't recognize. We were told to serve dinner with our eyes down. Look at the floor, don't talk. They sat in dim light, speaking a language I didn't understand. We brought dishes and left in silence. An hour later, they sent us all home, unheard of, as staff usually stay until the end. The next day, the family flew out. That evening, the news reported a fire in a city center building. Official cause, electrical fault. But I recognized one of the cars from our villa the night before. You mentioned guests. Who were they? All kinds. Politicians, actors, businessmen. That's normal. But sometimes there were guests you couldn't identify. No names, no titles. Even the drivers didn't know who they were transporting. Just, people are coming, don't look, don't ask, don't get close. One time, about 20 people gathered at the villa. The staff was sent to a separate wing. We could only hear voices behind closed doors, English, French, Arabic. It felt like they understood each other without translators. A few hours later, we were let back into the hall. There was a long table, half-empty glasses, barely touched food. In the center was a huge black envelope. The host took it and left. No explanation. But later, a news story broke about a bizarre corporate deal, and I realized decisions are made there behind closed doors while the media is just a theatrical show. You mentioned rituals. Is that real or just rumors? I thought it was rumors at first. But one night they lined us up and said, "Guests tonight. You work until midnight, then everyone leaves the house." It was the first time they explicitly ordered us out. Before leaving, I saw them taking paintings off the walls and covering windows. They set up a long table with items that had nothing to do with dinner. Silver bowls, candles, books in a language I'd never seen. The next morning, we were let back in. The table was empty, but the floor was damp like it had been hastily cleaned. And the smell, it wasn't alcohol or food, something metallic heavy. The staff exchanged glances but said nothing. It felt like asking would cost you your job or worse. When did you realize you were a target? It started with small things. My phone started acting strange, messages vanishing, call logs disappearing. Then I noticed someone was always nearby, no matter where I went, security always lingering. One day I returned to my room. We had small staff quarters and realized someone had been inside. My clothes were neatly rearranged, items slightly moved. On the table was a book I didn't own, old, leather-bound, no title. On the first page, written by hand, "We see you." I don't know if it was a sick joke or a warning. After that, I started sleeping with a knife under my pillow. Did you try to leave? Once, I told the manager I was tired, that I wanted out, that 10 years was enough. He listened calmly, smiled, and said, "All right, we'll think about how to let you go." A day later, I got a call. "They're expecting you at the countryside house." I went. The boss invited me into his office, poured me a glass of wine, and said, "You've done a lot for us, but you know too much." His look sent chills down my spine. He ended with, "We're not holding you by force, but remember, you'll always be part of our family, even if you leave." I still don't know if that was a blessing or a threat. You mentioned people disappearing. What happened? I can't give names. Even if I did, you wouldn't believe me. But over the years, I saw people vanish. One was an assistant like me, a young guy less than a year on the job. Everything was fine until he started asking too many questions. They asked him to come to the villa one evening, and no one saw him again. The media said he moved to another city. No one questioned it. The staff knew it wasn't a coincidence. Another case was a security guard. He started complaining about weird tasks, got nervous. A week later, he supposedly went on vacation and vanished. We never heard from him again. Every time this happened, the air felt heavy. These people play by their own rules. We're just pawns on their chessboard. Were there secret meetings? Yes, and they always felt like a performance. One night we drove guests to the mansion. All doors were locked. We could only hear whispers, muffled voices, occasional laughter. No one understood the language, but the tension was palpable. Hours later, the door opened, and we saw someone carrying out black folders. The next day, the news reported a multi-million-dollar corporate deal. No one knew how it happened, but I saw the papers being signed behind those closed doors. That's when I realized the world on TV is a facade. The real decisions are made here. When was the first time you feared for your life? It was in the basement of one of their mansions. I was told to move some boxes of documents. Then I heard a strange sound, quiet, metallic, like chains clinking. I turned and saw a man who shouldn't have been there. He stood in the shadows, silent, just watching. I froze. Seconds later, a guard walked in and said, "You're not supposed to be here." But the other man's stare, I still see it in my nightmares. After that, I started to feel real fear, not just job-related anxiety, fear that someone might decide I'm no longer needed. Did you start suspecting you were being followed? Yes, everything was too perfect. My phone, messages, calls, sometimes I'd notice people where they shouldn't be. Even when I tried to hide, I felt it, you can't escape. The book in my room was the first sign. I realized they knew everything. Even when I was alone, out of their sight, they were still in control. What do you think of yourself now? 10 years with these people changes you. You stop trusting your own instincts. You think you're smarter, that you're in control, but you're just a spectator in their game. Every day, as you complete another task, you realize the line between safety and danger is razor thin. Sometimes it disappears entirely. Tell us more about the rituals. Did they really exist? Yes, they didn't call them rituals, of course. Just special events or evening meetings where staff weren't allowed. But I saw the aftermath. Sometimes after these meetings, there was a strange smell, metallic, sweet, almost chemical. In the corner, candles, silver objects, books in languages I'd never seen. One night, I glanced through a crack in the door. The family and their guests were there, speaking quietly. I caught fragments of a conversation about people I'd seen alive just days before, and the next morning they were gone. After that, I realized, some things happening here can't be explained with logic. When did you realize you might not make it out alive? It was during one operation. I was told to escort a box of documents to a private plane. On the way, I noticed the car that usually followed us stopped. People I'd never seen got out. In that moment, I knew, if something went wrong, no one would protect me. 10 years with them taught me how to survive, but the line between life and death is paper thin. Did you ever see someone vanish before your eyes? Yes, one case sticks with me. A guest arrived at night, dressed in black, barely speaking. After dinner, he went to a separate wing of the villa. By morning, he was gone, no explanation. We all knew he'd faded into nothingness. It happened more than once. At first, you think it's a coincidence, then you see the pattern. What about staff safety? Safety is an illusion. Sure, there's security cameras, but they're not for you, they're for the bosses. They know who answers to who might be a threat. You can do your job perfectly, but one mistake and you might be redirected. No one explains what that means, but we all understand. How have you lasted so long? Simple, you stay quiet and follow the rules. No extra questions, no surprise, no trying to understand why. But there comes a point when silence becomes unbearable. You know too much. Every day, doing your job, you feel it. You're part of their world now, and there's no way out. Last question, what scares you the most? I'm scared that over these 10 years, I've become one of them. I'm scared that if I leave, I'll spend my life hiding what I've seen. And I'm scared they're still watching. Yes, they're billionaires. Yes, they have insane houses, planes, yachts, but the scariest thing is their control over reality. They can buy anything, sometimes even people. How do these stories end within the family? They don't. Every day is like the last. New tasks, new guests, new secrets. And every day the line between life and a game fades. I remember watching preparations for one evening event. It seemed simple, candles, tables, guests, but the atmosphere was different. Not fear, but something else. A sense of being trapped, where every step is a gamble with your life. Did you ever doubt you'd make it out alive? Yes, more than once. Especially after the book in my room and the disappearing guests. I noticed patterns. Those who asked too much vanished. Those who looked beyond their role disappeared. Every time I left the house, I checked if I was being followed. Every time I closed a door, I felt eyes on my back. Are you scared this is all too real? Fear is part of me now, it's always there. When I leave, I feel like someone still knows where I am. When I talk to friends, I think they're listening. Even here in this room, I hear footsteps in my head. My life has changed forever, and I'm not sure I'll ever tell anyone everything I've seen. Why did you decide to share this on Reddit? Because silence is crushing. Because sometimes, even for a moment, I want to share the truth, even if it's impossible to tell it all. And because I want someone to understand, behind the glamour and luxury is another world. A world where money isn't wealth, it's power over others' lives. Final thoughts. If you think this is just a story about rich people, it's not. It's about a world where the rules don't apply to everyone, where what seems safe can be a trap. And if you ever cross paths with them or end up nearby, remember, you're always on their turf. I'd love to end this post normally, but I can't. It feels like someone just entered the room. The phone I'm typing on is acting weird. The internet's lagging. This might be the end of the post. If this disappears, know that I tried to tell the truth.